Hey, hello. It is the Go Birds podcast presented by the Parks Casino and Sportsbook app. You love to play, you play to win, you bet. Parks, Eliot, Shorr-Parks, James Seltzer with you. Obviously, big day, E, back in your happy place.
Dude, I couldn't be more happy right now. Let me tell you, I woke up, set the alarm for 6 a.m. this morning. I was up at 5:30. It didn't even matter. It's like Christmas morning. I remember back when I was little, I would sleep like in a guest room before Christmas just so I could make sure I was up in time. I just it felt like Christmas morning. We'll obviously get into it, but the fun thing is it's not the only exciting thing that we got going on with the pod today.
You like Christmas morning. Talk about Christmas morning. So this is like a Christmas morning that I've been waiting for way too long. A voice you know, a name you know, a person who has been a big part of this thing, started this whole thing, made it what he was. And for the first time in a long time, we're going to welcome back in one of the founding members of the podcast. You might know him by a certain name. My daughter knows him as Uncle Brandon, one of my best friends on the planet. And we're so happy to have him back. Brandon Lee Gownton from BleedingGreenNation.com. What up, baby?
Let's go. That's how you know it's a big day.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Nice to be on any podcast at all. First of all, second of all, specifically this one that once upon a time, this podcast feed was started all the way back in 2013.
Crazy.
Somehow it's 11 years later. This is my 12th training camp. Wow. I don't know where the time has gone, but excited to be here with you guys.
Dude, let me tell you. So James can vouch for this, but the second that we saw, unfortunately, the Bleeding Green Nation pod wasn't happening. The first thing I said to James, I texted him we have got to get BLG on the pod. Not only because as the two hyphenated reporters in the city, we need to stand together. You a little taller, but standing next to each other. But I came onto this pod 5 years ago at this point, which is wild. And you are the one that started this pod. You and James, obviously, all the work you guys did to get it ready. So it has been an honor to kind of, be a part of it, and it wouldn't be happening without you. So I say to James all the time, I love talking to you at practice. I did not do it today specifically so I could save my save your takes for the show, but it is a true honor to have you on, and we have listeners that still talk about how they miss you. So I know they're very excited to hear you as well.
I appreciate that. And again, very glad to be here. I haven't podcasted with James truly
I know, man.
A long time. And
we've talked about it many times, and the many times we've hung out since.
Yes.
Now, I'll tell you this is the first time in a long time that my wife might actually listen to a podcast that I do. She was so excited that you were coming on. So yeah, it's awesome, man.
I am her favorite, as you once said.
Without a doubt. It's not even a question. And my daughter's favorite as well, Uncle Brandon Test.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Very cool. But look, not only this, it's the first day of camp. I can't. I'm very excited. Let's get into it.
All right. Yeah, let's get into it. This is going to be a lot of you guys telling me. Obviously, before we dive into what was on the field, I think we should address the what I think most fans were coming into today waiting to see and hear about. The two press conferences, particularly one, Sirianni. I don't think there's too much to say about it. We can get into how he addressed it earlier. But let's start with the Jalen thing, because you guys were both in the room for it. Eliot, you were the one who started to ask a question, and Jalen just shut it down, goes for a minute and a half. And, I think it was his way of addressing it. It wasn't like he was overly effusive about Nick, but he did include Nick in talking about, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman and Nick and trusting them. I'll start with you, Eliot. Your thoughts being in the room, attempting to ask the question, and then what you thought of Hurts's answer.
Yeah, so I had forgot that Jalen sometimes likes to start his pressers almost like a State of the Union. So I think he sat down ready for a statement. I'll be honest, in the dugout behind the scenes baseball, I wanted to be the one to ask that question. I was front and center, I wanted to. So I probably came in a little hot. But once he was done, I asked it again. And so I have two main thoughts, I think, of Jalen. One, and I'm curious to see if BLG agrees with this. I do think it was a different Jalen to an extent. I felt there was, in my opinion, a concerted effort from him to be a little more, his answers were longer. I thought he was a little more jokey. This is a dumb thing, but DeCamera brought it up. There was times where he smiled. I thought it was a Jalen that got the message from either from what's been said in the media or from, internally with the team, that they need him to be just a little more at the podium. So I thought he was that. Now, his answer on Nick, I will say, was not, I don't think we're starting this pod, or you guys will start the shows tomorrow being like, oh, what a great answer. He was kind of like, yeah, I get along with Nick, but it's all about the team, and the team needs to get along and everything. He didn't really dive into his relationship with Nick. So if we really wanted to nitpick, we could say he dodged it a little, but I think overall, I didn't leave that press conference feeling like it was the same, like, Jalen's mad, Brian Johnson is gone. He's, not giving you anything at the podium. I thought he put a concerted effort out there, and overall his answer probably checked, the most boxes you could kind of hope for.
Yeah, I feel you. I thought the Sirianni again, though, it seemed like he knew he had to throw Nick in there, and it almost was a struggle for him, at least the way I saw it. BLG, you were in the room. What did you think of the way he addressed it?
Yeah, I think the situation was not exacerbated really either by Jalen or Nick. So I think the Eagles did well, and the PR team did well to make sure they were ready for this. So kudos in that regard. But still, I think ultimately what was originally the most interesting thing when all of that kind of was really coming to a head late in minicamp there was what was not said. And I still think when you're looking at what was not said was like, it wasn't like, oh, this is a total non-issue. We love each other. It's great. And maybe that's okay, because maybe that would have come off as a little too try hard and not sincere and not authentic. So I think they kind of towed the line between those two things of trying to be like, of downplaying it well, but not to the point where it seemed like kind of phony.
BLG, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I do think he could have maybe and we're probably at this point, like, what's the expression, like the Zapruder film, or what is it?
Oh, Zapruder film. Yes.
Yeah, that's the Zapruder film. Like,
yes.
We're probably like
breaking it down like that. Yes, you're absolutely right. And we're talking about intonation and, all that stuff. I know. Yeah, that's what we do as well. I mean, that's all we have to go on.
We've talked about this press conference for 4 months at this point, it feels like. So, of course, that's what we're going to do. Again, it just felt like he skirted by it a little. Like it was, hey, how do you get along with Nick? Oh, me and Nick get along great, but like I get along great with everybody, and we need to be a close team if we're going to be great.
Exactly.
I think we want some kind of antidote from him of, look, I get along with Nick great. We text during the off season. I saw his kids a month ago, and those type of things that you probably want to hear. Doesn't mean they're not happening. Jalen did say later in the press conference that we see what he wants us to see. Like, he's not showing us everything. It would be awesome to see more. I do think Jalen would benefit from it. I think fans would benefit from it. So, we talked on a previous pod about what we kind of expected. I think they left this, and Brandon put it perfectly, like the situation was not exacerbated. I don't think we're going to have the morning show tomorrow or any of the shows saying, oh, here we go. Like, this was his chance and he didn't do it, and why won't he listen? Like, I thought it was a good press conference overall. It just wasn't like a home run.
Yeah, I think it was more like solid than good. I get your point, but I do think that we did want, to your point, we hear what he wants us to hear. We see what he wants us to see. I would like to see that you don't hate our coach. Like, honestly, like that's all I want to know. And it didn't. And again, to your point, I agree with you guys. The last press conference was a bad answer. We all know it. It had us talking about it for months when we shouldn't have been. It wasn't a bad answer today. I just don't think it was a good answer. I think it was fine. It was like the bare level that he had to reach to be acceptable to try and move on from this. But I can't say I'm not still concerned about the relationship. BLG, Sirianni's answer, I thought was better. Did the whole, I can only go by what our interactions are, but it wasn't, overly over the top either. What do you think about Nick addressed as well?
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said. Like, I don't, it was about what was not said. And it wasn't that, again, it was like, oh, that was blown out of proportion. I mean, how many times do players and coaches like love saying that, right? Like, oh, that was taken out of context, even when it's like in full context a lot of the time. But that was not the approach here. And again, I think they were cognizant of that. I did not think they wanted to be too defensive about it. I think that was very intentional. But again, ESP asked me about it after the Nick presser, and I kind of shrugged when he asked what I thought about Nick's answer. And I was like, it's still about what he didn't say. There isn't like this like full-throated endorsement still of like, so that's where I kind of come down on it.
Yeah, so I thought his answer was really good. I think that the way to say it is, look, I can only go off of how when I interact with him, how that is. And I think there is a lot of truth to that. I do wish I would have followed up and asked him, did he talk to Jalen about it? Because if there was like a report that, you know, like someone, like a source at WIP says James and Elliot's relationship is a work in progress, I feel like I would at least shoot you a text like, yo, like I saw this, isn't this wild? Right. So, I do kind of wish he would have followed up on it. I would say with Sirianni too, I didn't get a vibe that it was like, you know, no, we're good, like no problems. I think he was kind of like, look, when me and him interact, it's good. And that's kind of all I can go off of. So I thought it was a fine answer by him. I agree it was probably a little better than Jalen's. And that is what Nick is. Like Nick is, you said this on the morning show today, James, and I think it's true. And it also shows how much first impressions really matter. Like Nick is not bad at the podium. I know that now he gets treated as such because of what happened initially, but he's good at like putting out fires and stuff. So I thought his answer, like the logic was good. BLG, there was the quote from Howie that I thought was really good. Curious for your perspective on it. Like when Howie talked, he was questioned about the coordinator thing and how he picked the coordinators. And his logic was basically like, look, when we drafted Quinyon, Nick knew the head coach. Nick talked to the head coach. Nick got information. He brought it to me. When we were hiring coordinators, I knew Kellen Moore. I knew Vic Fangio. I brought that information to him. I think that's probably painting it a little rosy, but I think that's true too. Like I do think that.
You know that Howie made the call. Like you don't think do you think that if Nick Sirianni had said, I don't want Vic Fangio. I don't like the way he does it. I don't want him. The Eagles would have been like, okay, no problem. They wanted Fangio last year, but like they were going to, like, I don't believe, and I don't think Nick would have done that. I don't think he would have been like, I don't want Fangio, but I think it was a little more, hey, Nick, these are the guys we like. What do you think? Than it was, hey, Nick, here's some information on guys we know. Make a decision.
So I think a couple of things can be true. Holistically, I agree with you. I think if Nick was like, I want this guy, that Jeffrey and Howie would be like, but we're not hiring that guy. But I do think Nick wanted Fangio. So I think it's a little bit of both, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, on the specific case, who knows? BLG, your thought?
Exactly. Yeah.
The Kellen Moore one is a little hard to sell from a standpoint of they interviewed him to be head coach before Nick Sirianni. Right, and also they also had interest in him in 2020 too, to be like Doug's OC potentially. So it's like, you know, it's pretty obviously. I think the organization has had their eye on Kellen Moore for a while, and I don't really think there's an obvious connection between Nick and Kellen. Anyway, I think it's an interesting point. I mean, I thought the Howie Nick presser had multiple interesting points in there. Among them, to turn it back to Hurts for a second, I think one thing I've been kind of getting sick of discourse-wise is this, and some of this is from Hurts himself, this idea that like it's a new play caller. And I get that. And that's not an ideal thing, but that is the standard in the NFL today.
Yeah,
like this answer stood out to me.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't think there's any OC in the NFL that has been tenured beyond 2022. Like, think about that. That's not that long ago.
Yeah, Kellen Moore is the most qualified offensive coordinator in the
outside of like McVay and Shannon and head coaches who call their own plays.
About formal OC. Yeah. So it's just like, that's not the standard, that you're going to have this play caller there who's there for 10 years. So like, sorry, that's the it's not ideal. It's not perfect, but like that is the realistic standard. And I thought Howie Roseman, he didn't directly, make that comp, but he did talk about how like, continuity is not going to happen. And I think this is my conspiracy theory. That's more of what he was referring to in that answer when he brought up the fact that you're going to have turnover here.
Real quick. I thought it was funny how he kept going, not talking about Jalen.
Well, that was the point. I think that's totally what he meant. And I think he was absolutely talking to Jalen. And I think it was a bit of a like, hey, man, grow up. This is the way the NFL works type of situation. Like, I'm sorry, but that's the way the NFL is. There's always going to be turnover. They didn't want Shane Steichen to leave. It's not like they were like, hey, let's switch it up, man. Like, and look, but I'm sorry, your guy and Brian Johnson didn't work out, which I think we all know is really what Jalen's talking about. Like the continuity thing matters to him, of course, but I think it's, hey, you got rid of my guy after 1 year. I think that was unfair. I think that's kind of the subtext there of what that is. And like, man, it is what it is. You guys stunk last year, and you have to own your role in it too. So, look, I thought overall, to your guys' initial point, I don't think any of these press conferences had anything that was disastrous or whatever. It didn't make me worry. And I do think Nick is much better than he used to be. I just think he's not an eloquent speaker. So people are always going to kind of, it is what it is. He doesn't speak eloquently. So people think he sounds dumb, but he doesn't. If you actually listen to what he's saying most of the time, but sometimes he'll fumble on his words and all that. It is what it is.
So I had another quick thing from a press conference standpoint. Beal, were you in AJ Brown? Were you there? I
saw some of it. Yeah.
Okay. So AJ Brown talked about the changes in the offense. And I don't remember if he was asked exactly about the 95% thing that Jalen had said in terms of changes, but he said like a few times in the press conference that it's not that big of a change on the offense. And the biggest change is terminology. I just thought it was interesting because
which is what players on the station have been saying, like Richie and Ike and these guys, they keep saying, yeah, the terminology might be really new, but I'm sure the offense isn't that new. You know?
So I just thought that was noteworthy.
It's different positions too. You know what I mean? Like what a wide receiver has to learn maybe in a new scheme is a lot different than what a quarterback would have to learn. So yeah.
No, yeah, it's a fascinating point. All right, let's get into it. Do you guys have anything else from the press conferences before we get to actually what we saw on the field and actually talk football? I think we all would like to talk about what you guys saw out on the field. Actual football for the first time in months. We've talked enough about press conferences for the last 6 weeks. I'm sure we'll continue to. But to your point, I do want to say I don't think Jalen was perfect. It wasn't great, but I think it was acceptable. But I'm still, my radar is still up on the Nick Jalen relationship, and I think they didn't squash that in a way they could have today. All right, let's get into what you saw on the field, Eliot. I mean, let's start with everyone. We're all waiting for it. We all know. I mean,
we all know it's coming.
The quarterback stats. The first day, we're back. Tell us about the process. Any new additions to the stats this year, and what you saw from Jalen.
All right, so I think I want to do this like a bit of a different way. First of all, let me say, I did chart shotgun versus under center.
Look
for the people, because the people needed it. I'm going to tell you the stats, and before I say it, I want to see what BLG thought of the way he played.
Oh, I like this. Yes.
Right. So I'll tell you the stats, and then BLG, you tell me what you think of them. So
okay,
and then Eliot, you just jump in right after and give me your thoughts. I'll lay back.
So I had him down as 15 of 16, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions. What'd you think of his play?
Thought he was efficient. I have been doing my own system. I'm going to be doing at Bleeding Green Nation is like a thumbs up, thumb sideways, thumbs down. Keep it simple each day.
Yeah.
And I would go 1 thumbs up today. I thought he was efficient. I thought he looked so much more crisp and comfortable than he did the last time we saw him in minicamp. He didn't do anything like overly flashy. There was 1 good completion to Goddard downfield. Nothing like breathtaking, nothing amazing, spectacular. But overall, obviously the numbers kind of speak for it. He was efficient, didn't let the ball hit the ground other than the 1 incompletion. That's when there was a drop, right, by Devontae.
Yeah.
And that was a perfect pass. So, I'm not going to say, it like knocked my socks off. It was the best practice I've ever seen, but it was good.
So when you were saying the thumbs up, sideways, thumbs down, I thought you might go sideways, and I don't think that would be unfair. Like, I think if you want, so I gave him an A for the day. I do think there is a world where you can say an A practice should probably look a little more special than he did today. But what I thought was really encouraging about this today was he didn't look special. He looked efficient. Like, I thought he did an excellent job not leaving the pocket. Saquon had 4 targets for 4 catches. To me, that's a sign that he was checking it down instead of rolling out. Like me and BLG have watched many a practice where Jalen's just not throwing the ball. Like 7-on-7, he's holding on to it
so much. When you run in 7-on-7, it's pointless. What's the point of that?
It's a complete loss of a down. But even in 11-on-11s, there's times where he really like cuts the field in half and moves upfield. I had him down today as 1 quarterback run, and that run was 2. And one of those was an intentional run where they did like motion before the snap. He faked it to Saquon and then he ran. So I know people were very excited about the motion. I know it's the key to everything. But so I thought what was impressive about Jalen was that I thought he made good decisions. I didn't think there was a single pass he made that he put the ball in harm's way. You're right. The pass to Devontae, if I really wanted to nitpick, like it wasn't a good spiral, which I think is why Devontae dropped it, but it did hit him in the hands in stride. Like he should have caught the ball. So he was really close to being 16 to 16. The Goddard touchdown, I'm going to give it a little more credit than maybe it sounds like you are. He had a good protection and Goddard was open. So this was not like, oh my God, Josh Allen arm, like anything like that. But I thought that he put good touch on it down the field. He didn't like laser it in there. He kind of, I have to rewatch it, which I obviously can't. It almost looked like he threw it off his back foot, just kind of like lofting it to him. And I thought it became a really catchable, easy ball for him. So while it wasn't like, 4 touchdowns in the red zone, and they didn't do red zone, which is very noteworthy in terms of touchdowns, the fact he got a touchdown from 35 yards out, I think is impressive in these drills. So 15 out of 16 for 1 touchdown. Like, I think he gets an A.
Wow, this is I'm excited. Look, I would love to hear that he looked amazing and it was the greatest practice you've ever seen, to BLG's point. But I said coming in, I want him to be efficient. I want him to take what's given to him. I want to see that type of stuff. So
and that's what he did.
That's huge. And you guys mentioned the motion. What did you guys think? And I'll get to some specific battles and players with you guys. But BLG, I'll start with you. What did you think of actually how the offense looked in it, the motion, obviously, but just from a scheme perspective? I know they're not running the most complicated stuff on day one, but did it look different?
Well, the motion is the big story, as we've joked about here, and as it's like big on Twitter, I'm seeing. But also I think the tempo was another kind of thing that kind of got lost here. I don't know how you feel, ESP, but I felt like they were like, this is a pretty like juiced up, energetic pace for the offense to start. And I think that probably helped with the efficiency. Like they were really they had the defense, I think, on their heels a little bit at times with how fast they were running everything and operating everything. And speaking to that point, I mean, you have Mekhi Becton,
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. Like throwing up an hour.
I heard about it on Twitter.
But that speaks to like the offense was moving. They were like, things were like clicking fast. This was not, I think back to last year, by contrast, I don't know why I remember this because I'm a sicko apparently, but like, I remember the Eagles started out like rusty. They had like a really rusty start to training camp last year. So that's not the case this year. I thought they were really smooth as a whole, not just Jalen Hurts, but the whole offense.
No, I agree. So the tempo thing, I'm happy you brought up because AJ talked about that after practice and said that it is something they're working on. To your point, BLG, the first practice last year, Hurts was 6 of 10, then he was 11 of 14. So like they did start out
pulling up the stats there. That was strong.
Yeah, got to
on the fly, baby.
Got to. I keep them all open now.
You are in training camp form right now. I love it.
The Becton thing, not to get like graphic and people have weak stomachs. I've not often seen someone projectile vomit. It was gross. Like he was tired. It was clear liquid too. Like he did it on the field as well, like on the sideline. I feel like everybody was like, bro, can you just like take 2 steps to the right? Like we're about to be practicing there. But I think in terms of the offense, I agree with you on the tempo thing. They definitely did that. AJ talked about it, like I said, and said it's something they're working on. From the shotgun perspective, so here's what I had. Obviously, in 7-on-7, you're in shotgun every time. So in the 11-on-11 drills, shotgun, under center, which was like a jet motion wide receiver run, shotgun. So
he was shotgun. All right.
He was predominantly in the shotgun. Now we'll see. Look, it's day one. They could have been working on the shotgun plays, or it could be a day where I come back and he's under center 90% of the snaps. But I do think when we talk about like 95% changing and those things, I think he'll maybe be under center a few more snaps. They've definitely added a BLG. I don't know if you've noticed this, like in the running back drills before practice, they now practice like a jet sweep handoff instead of just the running backs. Like they have Covey do it. They have Smith do it, and not Devontae, the rookie. And then they have Campbell do it. So to me, the biggest change in the offense that I noticed today was probably like the motion and just like having like the running back like a jet sweep handoff thing.
Yeah, to a larger point, that's going to be fascinating this whole year. Like how much of what we haven't seen in the past is truly, just Sirianni and not just like Jalen Hurts' preferences as well. I think, the shotgun thing is not just a Sirianni thing. I think it's a big time Jalen Hurts. He likes to see the field from that perspective kind of thing. So that's certainly something we'll be monitoring here too.
One thing I was looking out for, sorry, really quick, and maybe I just didn't notice it. I'd be curious if you did. It didn't seem like they split Saquon out very much. It felt like he mostly came out of the backfield. And to your thing about what Jalen prefers, and this goes back to the McCaffrey discussion we've had, James, like McCaffrey, a lot of the damage he does is going in the slot and going over the middle of the field short. Like Jalen is willing to throw the ball down the middle of the field like 10, 15 yards. A lot of his attempts are like a middle field, like deeper, where I think he can see more. I think with McCaffrey, like the routes he runs over the middle, Saquon can run them. I mean, he's not the route runner that McCaffrey is, but I did not notice a lot today of Saquon going into splitting out from the backfield and cutting across the middle. Like to your point about the offense being Nick or Kellens, I think a lot of what we're going to see is what Jalen is comfortable with, like being in the shotgun, like etc.
Yeah, I don't know that Jalen Hurts has more than one completion to Saquon inside the numbers since OTAs began. I'm not sure about
that. You're right. Actually, that's a great point. I don't think I've seen a single one. I know in OTA, he had one completion to him that was right along the sideline. And today, I think they were all like that. It's a good point.
Yeah. All right, let's get to who stood out. ESP, obviously, we've already talked about Jalen. Who's someone or a couple people who really stood out to you today on either side of the ball?
It's a good question. I was thinking about this driving home. So, I think to go with the theme of the offense, they were just kind of solid. Like AJ, I have down as 3 targets, 3 catches. I don't think there was any special catches. The best play of the day on offense, in my opinion, was a throw from Kenny Pickett to Grant Calcaterra. That was like a 15-yard, maybe more than that, maybe like 20 yards. Like great coverage. Pickett put it just over the fingertips. It was a great catch as well. I thought that was like the wow throw of the day. So on offense, I didn't think anybody really stood out. It's hard to tell sometimes from being on field level. I didn't think the protection was like awesome today. I felt there were a few times where Hurts had to step up in the pocket, and to his credit, I thought he did a good job. I saw Huff beat Mailata at least once for a sack. So I didn't think the protection was awesome today. It's worth noting Landon Dickerson didn't practice, which is why Mekhi Becton was out there. So Tyler Steen was at right guard, Becton was at left guard, and then the other 3 were regular. But on offense, I don't think anyone had like a wow day outside of, what we've kind of talked about.
BLJ?
Yeah, I don't think there's a true standout today. I will say, I guess maybe a more noteworthy player, not because he did anything amazing, but because he was involved a decent amount, was Paris Campbell, who I made this point back in the spring because it really stood out to me. Again, Paris Campbell has not done anything that's like really amazing or exceptional. It's also kind of fine, I think, if you're, for a realistic expectation out of a third receiver, won't even be the third target in the offense. But I think what's most important about what is relevant, I should say, most relevant to that kind of role, does Jalen Hurts trust this guy to actually target him? And I think that's clearly yes. Like we've seen, like just not even too long into practice, Campbell had multiple targets right away. And again, they were like 5-yard completion, a 6-yard completion. So nothing thrilling, but still the fact that Jalen Hurts will throw to him and he gets open at some point, that is what kind of stood out to me on offense.
Well, I think that's a great point. Yeah, go ahead.
To that point, in the first 3 team reps, they did 2 11s and 2 7 and 1 7. Paris Campbell had 3 catches and 1 run. Now, obviously, I think we can all safely say Devontae is going to get more targets this year, but Devontae only had 1. So to BLG's point, like Campbell was very involved, and I think he is almost cemented in there as that third receiver, unless he obviously gets injured or they make a trade that's unexpected. I think he will be the third guy.
Yeah, well, like we've talked about when they brought him in, it's clear they've liked him for a long time. They talked about how they were going to draft him instead of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. It's a player they've had their eye on, and it's a player Sirianni knows, and he's a much better option than Quez Watkins. It's sight unseen for me on the Eagles. I know he's a better option. I do think BLG's point is salient, though. I think the fact that the most important thing with this role is, will Jalen trust him? We've seen spots where Jalen just doesn't go to certain guys in spots. And Quez certainly has had those moments. So I think it's a really important point that, look, it's going to be the 5th option on offense. The third wide receiver is important, but it's more important for other teams than it is for the Eagles. He's the 5th option on the offense. He just has to be that someone, when he's the open guy, Jalen will throw to him instead of trying to force it somewhere else. That's the key. All right, let's get to some of the, you got some, LC?
I was going to say Jeffrey Lurie was there watching proudly as Paris Campbell. That was his guy. That was
his guy, man. He knew.
He was there watching, saying, "This is what dreams are made of."
I mean, who really runs this team? We all know.
That's exactly
right. Eliot, let's get to some position battles. Obviously, hard to tell with I think the right guard position we talked about, probably the number 1 offensive, really the only big outside of third wide receiver, which you've commented on, that we really don't know what's going to happen there. But, Steen would have gotten the start. We know if Dickerson had been practicing. No, I know. If Dickerson had been there, he would have been, he was at the right guard spot is the point.
Oh, so
my point being, but you can't really tell that much from these practices with the O-line to start. Was there anything that stood out in that battle today outside of Steen just being at right guard?
Well, just to me, it would be that Becton played left guard. Like the guy plays tackle his whole career in the NFL. They have him at right guard, left guard, and they've had him at right tackle when Lane wasn't there. So I think he's obviously going to make the team, but I think he'll end up being the most important backup offensive lineman. I think on game days, he could legitimately be the top backup at 4 spots. So threw up today. So I don't want to sit here and be like, he had a great
not
day.
off to a great start.
Yeah. His first practice probably is not noteworthy for him, and it's hard to tell, but I just think the fact that he even played left guard is really telling of how high they are on him and what an opportunity they want to give him to, potentially start. I think, and BLG, curious what you think of this. I thought Sirianni left the door open more than I expected on Steen. He wasn't like, Tyler's the guy. We believe in him. We'll see what happens. He was like, hey, we don't have to have a depth chart out. It's a competition. We'll see what happens. And then he kind of at the end threw in there, like, Tyler's going to be out there today, but he was not effusive in his praise of Steen and saying that it's his job. So I think there's a good shot that Becton is on the field week 1, whether it's because someone misses a snap or because he's just flat out starting because of injury or because Steen didn't do well.
Yeah, I did think Sirianni's lack of effusive praise there was interesting, although not disqualifying by any means. I looked back at last year's coverage just out of curiosity among like the first practice notes that I mentioned earlier. I also saw a story in there from early in camp where Cam Jurgens was getting all the first team right guard reps last year, and Sirianni was asked about him like multiple days in the camp and like still wouldn't be like, yeah, he's the guy, even though it's very clearly the guy. So some of that, is like posturing or whatever, but I'd still think overall the sentiment and the takeaway is that, yeah, Steen is not locked in there. Our good friend Bo Wolf likes to point out, I think at the combine it was Sirianni was asked about, or
we talked about this too.
It was
but it was notable. He didn't mention him. He forgot his name. Like, he's your starting right guard when you're listing people of that position. I'm with you. We thought that was notable.
My thing on Steen is I think he just might be a tackle. Like, or at
I've
least
heard you say this. I don't know if I agree with you on that, but go ahead.
That's fine. So in college, he was playing defensive tackle at Tennessee before he transferred to Alabama to play left tackle. So like he didn't even have a lot of experience at tackle to begin with, and then they're tasking him to switch to right guard last year. Like that's a big like arc of changes in a short amount of time. And I thought he looked good at tackle last year when he was kind of running with the second team there. So he doesn't have like the ideal measurements for tackle. So it might just kind of be like he is a tweener who doesn't have like the right true fit in the NFL. But I think if he doesn't work out at guard, it's possible he just might not be a guard and he might be a tackle.
So I agree with you that like I think he might end up there. And this might be my bias of covering the Eagles and only ever seeing like gigantic humans with massive long arms at tackle, but he just doesn't look like a tackle to me. I don't think he's quick enough. I think his lower body is built more like a guard. Stoutland said this offseason, he thought his measurements, he like actually reminded him a lot of Brandon Brooks physically. Now, Brandon Brooks now is like, probably 240 and like a business major. So I'd like Brandon Brooks, like when he played, I think is different. So look, maybe he'll end up at tackle because he can't play guard. But to me, if he goes to tackle, it'll be because they're like, yeah, this isn't working. And this is a last opportunity to try him out there.
Right.